Terrans and the Namphuthians stared at each other across the table. "We refuse the Terran proposal," the 10-foot-tall Xeno stated with quivering tentacles. "It is intolerable." "But see here," the leader of the Terrans said, "if good men sit down and talk, acceptable solutions may be intolerable and inexcusable. This is not time for monkeys' chatter. This is time for war. This is time for extermination. Let me have a quick word with my colleagues," the human said as he stepped away from the table. "It'll only be a minute or so." The Terran delegation discussed briefly between themselves, before the leader stepped up to the table again, fangs showing. "So you are quite sure that you want to declare war on Terra? Or possible Terrans?" "Yes." The spokesbeing of the Namfuth delegation hissed. "Your hot-blooded species is an affront to the goddess and must be exterms." Sure. The Terran interrupted as two of the other Terrans brought their manipulatory digits together above their heads. "And just to be clear, you also reject the idea of adhering to the Geneva Convention, as amended for intraspecies warfare for this war? The mere idea of rules in war is a human madness and an affront to the goddess." "Yes, just checking." One of the other Terrans came up and handed the leader a data pad. "All right. So the war is definitely on? You're sure about that? And it's going to be a total war. No rules." One of the human's digits hovered over a big red button on the datapad. "We're going to exterminate your sorry excuse of babbling sentient." "Great," the human exclaimed as he pushed the button. "I tell you, the Boffins have been itching for this chance for years now. They're still working on the exact details. But in about 5 minutes we'll attack 1/3 of your planets, with some interesting pathogens we've developed to infect non-Terran life forms. 1/3 with a range of fun new chemical weapons. And the last third we're keeping in reserve for some other experiments in xenocidal warfare." "What? In 7 nanocycles? How can you order that so fast? And pathogens, chemicals, xenocidal. What? You don't have instant communication over interstellar distances? We worked out the trick of that a long time ago. It is an interesting side effect of a project to link the cores of several stars, to make a region-wide nova bomb. Nova bombs. What madness is this? Oh, we're unlikely to use that one right off the bat. We need the data of the weapon tests first." "Your species is insane." "Sure we are, buddy." "Oh, and if you want to surrender unconditionally, we can still call off the Boffin's fun field tests. You got 4 minutes left." The Namtooths looked at each other, tentacles stiff as the Terran smiled brightly at them. "Surrender on what conditions?" "Terran. Unconditionally. That means that you give up, and we give no guarantees, reassurances, or promises. This is not how things are done. This is an affront to the goddess and to... It is how things are done now. No rules in war. Remember." "Oh, and it's 3 minutes left, by the way. But how can we be assured that you will not go ahead with this monkey business if there is no reassurances?" "You can't, but you can hope we'll feel merciful. Which, I assume, is an affront to the goddess. Most of things we do seem to be." 2.5 minutes. The Xenos seem to shrink and shrivel. "We will surrender. Unconditionally." The Namtoothian spokesbeing looked towards the rest of his group before replying. "Unreservedly, but with some hope." "Great," the human said as he held out the datapad. "I'm gonna need your signature here. Here, and here. And from the rest of you guys, too, if you don't mind." One by one, the Namtoothians signed and were escorted out, heads so low their tentacles dragged on the floor. As the last one left, the head of the Terran delegation turned to the others. "High five. Gentlemen, they bought it. Nova bombs and instant interstellar communications," said the one who had given him the datapad. "Why are Xenos so gullible?" "I guess," the head of the delegation said as he grinned, "that if they believe we'll break the laws of war, they will believe anything. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you on our next story. SteamSaga. Continuing at SteamSaga. I was just 3 weeks out of training, and I already have had enough of this war. The Threens were winning. They were ruthless, sadistic, and totally without mercy or compassion. Whenever they found one of our colonies, they started the occupation by destroying our birthing, pools, killing our young while still in the larvae stage. Helpless. We fought back as best we could, but our ships were smaller, slower, and poorly armed. We faced a war of extinction, and yet our leaders kept trying diplomacy. After every meeting with the enemy, they promised to stop their actions, but they never did. They always just lied to our leaders, and our leaders lapped it up like the groveling dogs they were. I was assigned to the 3rd Response Unit, outfitted with one of our race's newest ships. Top of the line, state of the art, but still a joke compared to our enemies. One thing my ship did have going for it was a small faster-than-light engine, unheard of really in such a small vessel. An idea came to me as I lay in my bunk talking with my wingmate. We were discussing how we just fled from a Threen assault, giving up an entire planet. To them, condemning every one of us still left on that rock to a gruesome death. "You know what?" I said, my arm draped over my eye stalks as if to hide from the fate we just imposed on many of our race. "I think the humans were right." My wingmate coughed in shock. "Why bring those crazies into it?" he asked. "Don't we have enough to contend with already?" "Yes. What they did, it opened many an eye stalk. That is for sure. When the humans were first discovered and introduced to the galaxy at large, they were excited. They were always smiling, hopeful, and optimistic for their futures. They were so happy to find out that they finally were advanced enough to be accepted into the galaxy. I remember seeing screen grabs of the Dolan ambassador laughing, literally laughing in the face of the human representatives. Advanced enough. He roared with mirth. Who cares if you are advanced enough? Your planet is rich in resources. That's all the advancement we need. The smile on the humans' faces seemed to crumple at that, though they valiantly tried to remain optimistic of the situation, until the Dolans took untold millions of tons of resources and refused to pay, saying, "Now you know to get payment up front. That knowledge is the only payment you will get from us." And the Sleen Empire. They invited 100,000 humans to come live on their planet, only to slap them in chains when they arrived, and made slaves of them. When the humans, enraged at the treatment of their people, demanded the release of those captured, the Sleen Empire said, "Very well, we are sending the 100,000 to you now," and then sent 100,000 Viridium-tipped missiles into human cities and settlements. It was after that when the Jandis Collective offered them medicine to treat the Viridium burns. At first the medicine was a godsend, curing the burns and disease caused by the missiles. But then every human that had gotten treatment died in horrible agony. The Collective had used the humans as test subjects for a biological weapon. The humans, after this, cut off all contact with the galaxy at large. They had become a laughingstock, and were the butt of many a joke and insult. They refused any ship, left any hail unanswered, and never left their own area of space. But 2 of their years later they opened channels to the galaxy and broadcast this message. "We welcomed you with open arms. Some of you laugh at us, and that is fine. But if you betrayed us, this is your only warning. Run!" Oh, how they all laughed. These stupid humans. What could they do? The galaxy did not laugh for long. It seems that even though humans were the punchline of many a joke, they were still able to study the weapons and craft of their enemies and improve on the designs. The first sign that the humans might be a force to be reckoned with was when all 7 of the Sleen Empire core worlds were bombarded with tens of thousands of a new type of Viridium missile, ones which seemed to react violently with the atmosphere itself, making the air unbreathable, and saw people immolated where they stood, even 1,000 miles from where the missile hit. Most of the galaxy thought this a fluke, that the humans blindly stumbled into creating a weapon that worked better than they planned. But when the Jandis Collective began to fall sick, world after world of collective members, dying in agony from a disease so potent, it caused necrosis of the skin to where body parts started to fall off the infected. The galaxy realized this was indeed the humans, exacting revenge. Medical teams from many worlds studied the virus, and it seemed the Jandis Collective's own disease they used on the humans was mutated with a human disease called leprosy, and the result was disastrous. The galaxy at large called on the humans, begged them to stop their warfare, and none so loud as the Dolans. They apologized to the humans, offered to pay back what they owed double. They waited in fear for the human response, and when over a dozen large ships appeared, in the skies above the Dolan homeworld seemingly out of nowhere, the Dolans were heard from no more. Their world was laid waste, and the humans sent out one last message over 600 years ago. Do not come near human space. Do not approach us. Do not contact us. Do not even mention us. If any ship approaches, be it a vessel of peace or war, it will be destroyed. There will be no further warning. The galaxy's races, of course, assembled for war. How dare this upstart race order them what to do? So thousands of ships flew to human space to wage war. Not one of them returned. Not one. Over the centuries, envoys have been sent to human space, all with the same result. The ship's engines would cut out for no reason. Then the ship would be destroyed. The humans were right, I repeated. Everyone else in this galaxy sit there and watch us die, slowly at the hands of the Threen. They do nothing. We would all be better off if we were just left alone. We would be better off if we were like the humans. And I stopped. My wingmate scoffed, but an idea had been planted in my head. A wild, crazy idea, but no more crazy than flying off undergunned to fight a more powerful opponent. Tomorrow I would fly for human space. Tomorrow I would do what no one dared to do for centuries. Tomorrow I would ask for help from the most dangerous race in the galaxy. It is no small wonder that when I flew off, away from battle, my superiors thought me a coward. They threatened me with death if I did not return with their ship, but I was already light years from their grasp. My ship was, after all, the fastest single-manned vehicle my race possessed. Even as fast as it was, it took weeks for me to near what we all thought was human-controlled space. I was nervous, scared that at any second I would be vaporized by some unseen hand. But still my ship flew on. Hours later, as my stores of food were dwindling, my engines cut out for no apparent reason. My hands flew on the controls, but all systems reported they were working properly. Perplexed, I wondered why. If everything was working, by Saturday dead in space. And then it hit me. Humans quickly. I activated my communicator and broadcast on all frequencies. Greetings. I am Pilot Javine of the 3rd Response Unit of the Balkan race. Silence was the only reply. I come to beseech your aid. The Threen Empire is decimating our people and our worlds, and the galaxy at large just sits there, waiting like vultures to pick at the bones of my people and my culture. Silence. Once your race also battled with the apathy and betrayal of the races of this wretched galaxy. We have suffered once, as we do now, from the disdain and callousness of races that pledge to help, yet do nothing, from races that swear to defend, but instead betray. Javine checked his broadcaster. Everything seemed to be working. He continued, We were discovered as a world a century after you had left the galaxy. We never had the opportunity to know you, but I know of you. The old races speak your names in fear, as the only race to stand up to the evil that permeates the very core of this expanse of space. Silence. I know why you turned your back on the other races. I understand, as my race is betrayed just as yours was. Silence. But you can help us bring an end to the way things are. How can you sit on the sidelines, doing nothing while peaceful worlds burn? Silence. How can you be so cruel? Silence. Angry, Javine yelled into his communicator. How can you be so cowardly? He sat in fear, waiting for his death, when without warning, his engines came back online. Confused. He looked around, wondering what was happening, when across his communicator, a single word scrawled from right to left. Run! Slamming his fist down in anger and frustration, Javine roared into his communicator. Run! Run! My own people think I ran from a fight with the Threen. Now you tell me to run like the other races. You want to know the truth? You're the worst race of them all. I will show you. Run! And with that, Javine ran to the engine room, ripped his sidearm from his holster, and fired it into the FTL engine that was his only way home. His only escape, his last hope. He fired until his weapon was dry and the engine was little more than a pile of smoking slog metal. Breathing heavily, he roared back into the communicator. Cowards. You will not shoot me in the back. Look me in the eye stalks if you're going to kill me and be done with it. Silence. In a fit of rage, Javine smashed his empty sidearm into the communicator again and again. Now it truly would be silent. 2 days later, Javine's ship still floated dead in space. He Saturday on the floor, hugging his legs to his chest and still bristling with anger. He regretted his rash decision and wished he had died fighting the Threen. At least that death would have meaning. It was then that he felt a strange vibration. He looked up and around, trying to discern its source, when a strange voice, a human voice, but speaking perfect Balkan, seemed to fill his head, emanating from all around. Him. Lieutenant Javine of the Balkan Empire, I extend you greetings. The voice said, We have heard your request for aid in your conflict, and having spent the last days researching your plight, we, the Terran Empire, gladly offer you our unconditional assistance. Javine Saturday stunned, mouth agape. Please stand by for your vessel to be taken aboard the UES. Kavik for repairs. Thank you, Javine said timidly, unsure if the humans would be able to hear him. Your thanks are not necessary, came the reply. In fact, we owe you an apology. We have distrusted the other races for so long, we forgot what it was like to be facing them alone. You reminded us of something we long thought was impossible. What is that? Javine asked timidly. That there can be other races out there. Brave, defiant, good at heart, races that remind us of us. And with that, the words stopped, and Javine saw from his view Port 6 large angular vessels shimmer and appear from seemingly nowhere, huge and bristling with weapons. Help was here, the humans answered. Part 3. Kavak sat on the stone bench, enjoying the midday sun on his hide. Hot days like this helped him feel just a little younger than his 100 cycles. He looked up at the statue that never failed to move him. He remembers the day it was erected, 60 cycles ago. The excited chattering of the next class drifted down the hall to him. This was his favorite part of the history class he taught. For most, it was just history, something that happened before their time. But to him, it was still alive in both his hearts. Come in and take a seat. Hatchlings. Raising his voice to be heard over the noise 30 hatchlings could make. Kavak sometimes got irritated by how difficult it could be to quiet 30 students who were barely 10 cycles old. But then he remembered his childhood and how difficult it was. He preferred the happy chatter of the hatchlings over the fear and hopelessness when he was their age. Quiet down. Hatchlings. Looking sternly at them. So for today's lesson I brought you to one of our people's most sacred monuments. He began to stroll to the statue before pointing at it. Who can tell me what this statue depicts? Kornach, picking a student from the back row. Kornach stood. It's a human, honored elder. Kavak nodded in approval. Very good. Kornach, you may be seated. And who can tell me about the humans? His arms clasped behind his back as he turned to look at them. Rujdak. Rujdak rose and confidently stated, They are aliens, but my sire calls them just a myth, a legend. Kavak looked out at the other students. How many of you agree that humans are a myth? Almost every claw shot up. Kavak shook his head and thought to himself, Less than 90 cycles for real events to become a myth. That is incorrect. Ruidak. Your sire is quite wrong. Turning to look up with reverence. I was there when the humans appeared to us, saved us. An excited buzz coursed through the class. Several students asked questions at the same time. Really? Were humans as tall as the statue? Where are they now? Did you meet any? Kavak held up a claw to quiet them. Yes, I was there when the humans came. He took a moment to gather his thoughts. I wasn't much older than you are now when we still lived on Korthan. Another excited buzz at the mention of their former homeworld. The young grew up on tales of life before they had to leave the planet. To the young, it was so long ago that they forgot some Kexians were still alive from that time. Kavak stood in front of them. There was no Kexian Republic then, and we'd only recently left our world for the stars. We'd established a few colonies on our moons, but couldn't even explore our entire system. Yet. My sire was a member of the ruling council of elders. Kavak still felt proud of his sire. We sent messages to the stars, wondering if we were alone. We made first contact with the Kumarians, and from them we learned of many other races. Small groups of aliens came to trade and welcome us to the galactic community, one of which was the humans. Unlike most aliens, they were fair in their dealings with us. It was one of their laws when it came to interacting with those races new to the stars. Kavak continued. We traded for new technology, including new tools to examine our system and to explore our world. It was one of these new devices that warned us of the danger building inside our second moon, Pataxurk. As always, a rush of memories came to Kavak when he taught this lesson. What was the danger? One of the students exclaimed. Kavak hid a smile as he replied, I will tell you in a moment. Be patient. Pressure was building to an extremely high level, and there was concern it would endanger our science outpost there. Kavak took a breath. We didn't think big enough that it would crack our moon and send chunks of it to our home world. At first our scientists just studied the changes, but things changed once they saw the fault. Lines beginning to widen, and then the moon quakes became more frequent, more intense. They sent messages to scientists of various races, and they warned us it was just a matter of subcycles before it cracked wide open. And then they told us it would most likely destroy our planet when the huge chunks hit the surface. Our other moon couldn't sustain life. It was just another outpost, Kavak said. Kavak remembered the looks on the faces of the adults, the hushed whispers and discussions about what to do. We were still new to space and had very few ships capable of leaving our system. We needed help if we were to survive. Messages were sent to all the races we'd met. He still remembered his sire's anger. They either ignored us or offered to sell, rent their ships for an exorbitant amount. A few offered us shelter, but in return we'd be like slaves for them. Kavak still loathed the Kassanet for that so-called offer. We'd just about given up on help from other races, and made plans to get as many out as possible. Kavak enjoyed how engrossed the students were in his toll. We had no idea that someone answered our call, but the humans did. A massive fleet arrived. Thousands of ships of all sizes. Warships, transports, luxury, liners, cargo haulers, and shuttles by the hundreds to move us from the planet to the ships. The humans apologized for taking so long to get there. My sire calculated how long it took to travel from Querthan to the humans' home system. We'd left less than a rotation after they got our message. Looking at his students' faces, he remembered having that same look of astonishment. Kavak continued. And now humans were known to be efficient, but the level of their preparation was beyond belief. They knew just how many of our people could fit per ship, with our most necessary possessions. Teams of humans worked with our people to dismantle our most important buildings. Temples, factories, space launching facilities, monuments, schools, and others were just torn down for the material. Samples of native flora and as much fauna as they could safely catch were taken aboard. Explorer ships set up to do just that. Surprisingly, they managed to get samples of almost all flora and large numbers of wild fauna. All the wild animals you see in the parks and wild are from our home planet. It still left Kavak in awe at just how much they did in such a short time. They'd even completely evacuated and removed our outposts on both moons, and extracted large amounts of our resources for our use in rebuilding. Kavak smiled as he teased the students. Remember that when you complain, it takes too long to clean your dams. Kavak carried on with the tale. They did this without stopping for 10 rotations. They took us to a planet they'd been terraforming for their use, but hadn't occupied yet. We got another surprise when we landed and found another large group of humans had been putting up temporary shelters for us. Holes have been dug to transfer the water from our planet, to save on the time it can take to have enough for all of us and our animals. So the moisture processors can supply enough to create all the lakes and some of the rivers you see now. With this world being much closer to Querthan, they were able to make multiple trips back and forth. All of our people, except the ones that stayed to help, were transferred here in less than 8 rotations on Querthan. That would be 6 rotations here. My sire was one of the volunteers and told me they worked until almost the last minute. Before it happened, Kuvok vividly remembers the sorrow in his sire's voice as he described the death of our world. I was with my sire when the Council of Elders met with the humans that had been in charge of the evacuation. Kuvok continued. The elders asked how they should repay the humans for their help, and one of them made a joke. He said, "It was traditional to repay someone with pizza and beer when they help you move." They were confused, but all the humans laughed at that. Kuvok followed up by explaining it was a joke. They asked for nothing but our friendship, and to not be like the races that refused, or tried to take advantage of us. Humans stayed 2 cycles to help us get our civilization in order again. Cities were built, flora planted, and then wild fauna released. They even helped us establish and build a fleet of our ships. Not just military, but civilian and exploration vessels. Our warships are only slightly modified from the designs the humans gave us. Kuvok finished with, "Humans are real, and we owe them a great debt." The students began talking excitingly about the lessons before one student raised a claw. Yes, Hai Tok. Kuvok was sure what the question would be. They always asked eventually. Honored elder, if the humans are real, then why haven't we seen them? Haytok queried. They were betrayed, Kuvok stated simply. Many of his students gave an audible gasp at this statement. Several students spoke out with questions that all amounted to the same thing: who betrayed them, and how. That will be fully explained at a later date, but to summarize. Kuvok took a sip from the container of water where he kept it on his belt. 29 cycles after we arrived on this world, a new race entered our galaxy. They were almost as malevolent as they were powerful, and they announced their arrival by destroying 8 colonies from various races. Kuvok said. The only reply they gave to calls sent to them was simply, "Submit or die." But that was a lie. Kuvok took another sip. He always needed fluids by the end of the lessons, from all the talking. He continued, "A Berithian colony surrendered to them, and they still destroyed it. They enslaved some of the people, but they exterminated others in horrific manners. An object lesson," they said. The humans were furious. The Berithians were a peaceful people and not very numerous. Kuvok said, "I asked one why they reacted that way, and he replied, 'We don't like bullies, especially when they target our friends.' So the humans called for war against the new race. We didn't even know their name." Kuvok shook his head in disgust. The Great Council argued over it. Some assumed they would only attack the lesser races and leave them alone. Others wanted to keep trying the diplomatic route. Others agreed, but would only protect their space. Ourselves and over a half-dozen smaller races answered the humans' call, but we could only muster 60 real warships between us. Where the human ambassador had raged at the more powerful races, he warmly welcomed us to join the effort. The only one of the most powerful races, the Kithrenka, promised support, but being on the other side of the galaxy, it would take some time to get a fleet to human space. It was at this point that the human ambassador shamed the rest of the council by saying they didn't need them, they'd just be in the way, and promptly exited the chambers with us joining him. Kuvok kept on with the story. The Kithranka ambassador barely said anything before he nodded at us and left to contact his govt. The human ambassador thanked us for being loyal friends and got us in contact with their fleet command. Another student raised a claw. Then what? Did we fight? Kuvok proudly replied, "Yes, we did. I was serving on one of our cruisers and made sure I got to go help our friends. The humans only requested 5 ships from each of us. They didn't want us defenseless. So we joined with the humans' armada. It was far larger than the one that saved us, and it was all warships. I was told there were over 100,000 ships of various sizes, from massive carriers to small starfighters. But the enemy brought more and bigger ships. Images of the chaos of battle filled Kuvok's head before he continued. The humans had us in reserve to counter their flank attack. I'd never even heard of a battle this massive, let alone seen. Kuvok's heart began beating faster as he remembered the terror and exhilaration of the fight. The humans drove straight into the center of the enemy's formation. It was so chaotic that it was almost impossible to tell friend from foe. Another student spoke up. "What about you and our ships?" Kuvok continued. We did as asked and attacked any ships that got around the flanks. Mostly fighters and destroyers. But we did have to gang up on a large cruiser, too. And after 3/4 of a rotation, the battle was over. Kuvok looked at each student. Only a few of the enemy escaped and none of their capital ships. But the humans paid a very heavy price for victory. 80% of their fleet was destroyed and the rest heavily damaged. All but a dozen capital ships were floating wrecks. Our little squad only lost 3 ships destroyed, with the rest damaged in one way or the other. The human casualties were in the millions. Dead, wounded, or missing. Kuvok looked at the scars on his right arm from an exploding console after a massive hit. And the next 2 rotations were spent rescuing survivors from wrecks and sending wounded to hospitals all over their space, including our wounded. Unlike other races, the humans didn't differentiate in treating their wounded and their allies. Kuvok continued. Aside from the Zathreks, we went to the same hospitals as their wounded. The Zathreks could only go on a special hospital ship that would take them home, since their biology made it difficult to treat in a standard human med facility. But the humans treated them as a priority to get home. A small Kithranka fleet arrived a rotation after the battle. Only 25 smaller ships that had been on convoy duty were much closer than the home fleets. They were sent ahead of the others. Is that how they were betrayed? That the others didn't show up? A student named Palinka asked. No, the enemy did not take their defeat lightly, and they launched antimatter torpedoes into the stars of systems inhabited by human colonies. Even the humans' home system was targeted, and their cradle world was destroyed. Kuvok replied, unable to keep the sadness from his voice. The betrayal came from one of the races on the council, either scared of the enemy, or angry at the humans that relayed the location of all the humans' major colonies. Another student, Sinagis, asked, Who did that? Kuvok answered, We don't know. But since the location of one of the destroyed human military bases was known only to less than a doubting races, someone gave it up. So that killed all the humans? Kuvok didn't see which student asked. No. Less than 1 million humans survived on a few minor colonies and stations. Kuvok continued. They spent the next 10 cycles rebuilding their military and constructing 5 massive motherships. The humans wanted revenge, and they were going to find the enemy's space and finish what they started. Gavuvik took another sip, and so all but a few humans left this galaxy to take war to the enemy. The ones that stayed all died eventually. So we built this statue to remember them and their friendship with us. Kuvok finished. And now, my inquisitive little hatchlings, the lesson is over and it's time to go home. Just a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart for getting involved in today's stories. Your love, your support, your time always means a lot to me. So thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.